back and we're talking about the historic indictment of a former U.S. president. Happened today in the Manhattan courthouse, a downtown courthouse in Manhattan today. Donald Trump had to appear for an arraignment where he pled not guilty to a 34-count indictment. The indictment was later unsealed. And we have been able to take a look at it and see what the charges are. They all stem from payments made by his then attorney fixer, Michael Cohen, to try to catch and kill, to stories that were negative to Donald Trump that they believed could have impacted the 2016 election, or at least those are the allegations in that indictment. Melanie, what, if any, impact do you think this indictment and potential other indictments that Donald Trump may be facing will have on his re-election bid for 2024?
You know, I think it's going to continue to fire up its base, his base, but I'm not as concerned about that as I am about the overall divisiveness that it is lending to in the country. You know, it's really, President Biden was asked today if he felt that the indictment would promote divisiveness, and he smiled. He's supposed to be the president. He didn't say anything who was going to bring the country together, and he smiled. Like, I'm way more concerned about that. I'm concerned about the people of New York City. While Alvin Bragg is spending his time trying to make sure that he can prosecute Donald Trump, he is lowering the charges on violent offenders, and it's a very dangerous place for people to live nowadays. I was in New York over the weekend. Not very comfortable as it used to be back in the day. And, you know, it's a very good chance that if something were to happen to me and I defend myself, I'm going to be the one who ends up in handcuffs. I don't know. It's really hard to understand why why a prosecutor would act the way he acts. But I think that it's going to fire up his base. I don't know how Donald Trump is going to end up doing, whether or not he'll end up being a nominee or not. But I do think that it is throwing fuel on an already lit fire when it comes to divisiveness in the country, political divisiveness. And I think that part is sad and did not have to be. It wasn't worth it. You know, you spent millions of dollars.
Melanie, hold a second, Melanie. You're concerned about Joe Biden smiling, but yet when I ask you about the threats that Donald Trump has made on his social media platform, he's threatened death and destruction. His words, if he was indicted, that was before the indictment. And in a post last month on the same social media platform, Truth Social, he called Alvin Bragg an animal, backed by the liberal mega donor George Soros, who is Jewish. So you're concerned about Joe Biden giving, I'm sure, what was a sarcastic smile, if anything, but yet you're not saying anything about these obvious threats towards Alvin Bragg. And speaking of New York, I was there. Hold on. Speaking of New York, I was there myself this weekend. I walked around the entire city with my two daughters. I didn't feel threatened at all. We were walking at night. We were walking at day. So obviously, we must have been visiting two different New Yorks. I felt incredibly safe, so much so that I was out walking at night. But I do want to ask you before we run out of time, Mutaki, this indictment obviously does not prevent Donald Trump from running. You can run for president while being indicted. You can run for president even if you are convicted of crimes, including felonies. But what impact do you think it will have, not just on the election, but on those other investigations, the one in Georgia, the two that are taking place in the Justice Department? Do you think they will in any way escalate those investigations, and we may see indictments coming down from those investigatory bodies?
I still think there might be some indictments coming down from those as well. And I think this being the start of it could hopefully push those prosecutors to move forward. And again, I think they are being careful. I think they want to make sure that if they indict, that they can get a conviction as well. And I think that's very important, because the one thing that we don't want Trump to get indicted and then get found not guilty, because then he'll feel very, very untouchable at that point. So I think they're being careful. But I do think this is probably a step in the right direction of these other prosecutions as well.
Yeah, and we were able to find that tweet, the tweet of Donald Trump in the back. Let's take a look at it. So I don't know about you. Alvin Bragg is clearly not a punk because he stood up to Donald Trump in ways that nobody has been willing to do. He was willing to be the first to jump out there and indict him. But no one, including a sitting district attorney, should be subjected to that kind of threatening social media posts. And we do know that Donald Trump speaks to his followers in these coded kind of pictures and images and words. And I hear what you're saying, Mutaki, about the judge being careful, because we are in uncharted water and territory with the indictment of a former president who's running for president. So the judge obviously wanted to be mindful of his First Amendment rights, mindful of his rights to be able to go out and campaign and talk about his indictment. But I hope this judge has a short, fuse when it comes to this kind of nonsense and this kind of threats, because these threats can lead to someone's safety being jeopardized. And to bring in Alvin Bragg's wife, I mean, but it's just classic Donald Trump. He talked about Ted Cruz's family members. He talked about Marco Rubio's family members. That's what he does. He goes so low. He shoots below the belt. He goes to the base. He appeals to the people's, just their base instincts to try to make his point. And the reality here is this man has done something no other president has done in the history of this country, and that is to be twice impeached and now once indicted for covering up crimes so that he could win the 2016 election. And this case is going to be a case of first impression. Mutaki, before I let you go, what about trial? It's probably going to happen either right in the midst of this election, 2024, or right after. What's your prediction?
I was, kind of thinking about that as well. And his attorneys might try to file for a speedy trial to get it over with, faster, as opposed to trying to stretch it out. Because again, they don't want it to go on like in the middle of the election. So that might be my strategy. I think, like I said, it's 34 counts, but it's one incident times 34 seems pretty straightforward. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure it's going to take that long to do it. If they don't, then we're looking at probably December, January for the election to take place and the trial to take place.
Yeah. Melanie, will the party stand behind Trump if he is convicted of any of these charges?
I don't know. I can't speak for the party. I would think that you would have to have a whole lot more evidence, but I don't know. I would think the circles in which I travel, I'd be privy to these secret languages, and I have never been motivated to go hurt anyone, or even, I don't even curse at people who don't agree with me, let alone threaten them violently. So I don't know. I don't know this secret language or the dog whistles or whatever. And I feel like I said, the circles in which I travel, I'd be privy to these things. And I am not, but I hear people on the other side of the aisle accusing
Melanie, it's not just people on the other side of the aisle. Some of those insurrectionists in their sentencing hearing told the judge that Donald Trump told them to come to D.C., that Donald Trump told them to invade the Capitol as they were pleading for their freedom. They were saying, oh, this is the worst mistake I ever made. I followed this man. He summons us here. So these aren't the words of Democrats. These aren't the words of folks that don't like Donald Trump. These are the words of his followers who said they risked their own freedom. They destroyed their families. They lost their jobs because they listened to Donald Trump, who told them to come to Washington. So we're not making this up. This is real. Republicans need to figure out what y'all going to do with Donald Trump, because you can't continue to live in this fake fantasy world that he has created. The facts are the facts. And Alvin Bragg has set the standard for other prosecutors around this country to stand up to Donald Trump. And I said this in my first hour of the show. If somebody had stood up to Donald Trump decades ago when he was discriminating against blacks in New York, when he was manipulating the values of his property, and when he was doing all kinds of other stuff that would have landed me, you, or Mutake in jail, Donald Trump wouldn't be facing, I think, the kind of criminal jeopardy that he faces today. But it is because people have enabled him. They have surrounded and they've supported his BS that now he finds himself the only former president in this country's history to be facing felony indictment. And I predict that this is one of many We're going to continue to
Well,
follow. We're going
if
to
that's
continue
the
to follow this
standard,
case.
Joe Biden is right behind him. If that's the
Wow.
standard that Alvin Bragg has set, Joe Biden will be in the cell right next to my boy.
Yeah. That's what you Republicans would like to think. You all are in la la land, fantasy land. Donald Trump is going down. And you know what I'm happy about? It's a black man with a Harvard Law degree that's taking him down.
There's
On
a lot
that
of
note,
people that
I
have
say
Harvard
good
Law
night.
degrees.
Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580 Sports News and Traffic up next.